We are here in Poland visiting Lukasz in Szapnik, a town outside of Krakow. And my name is Ingrid Indergaard, and I work with the Norwegian Association of Mycology and Foraging. And we have been here with Lukasz for 2 days in an edible plants workshop and learned over 100 species that is edible in nature here. And I am lucky enough to have this conversation with Lukasz. He said yes to meet me on camera to answer and tell me a little bit more about him and his interest in ethnobotany and edible plants.
My name is Lukasz Luczaj, which is spelled completely differently. You can see it on the text. And I work both as an individual for many years promoting wild food and ethnobotany, but also as a professor of botany in the local university of Rzeszów. And I have been living in this valley in the hills for 27 years. I was 24 when I had this dream that I want to be more independent, I want to have my own land, and it wasn't of greed, it was because I wanted to be allowed to manipulate the vegetation. So it was like having a big sandpit to play with.
Yes, and I have seen some of the results today of your playground here and how you have worked up these amazing areas, and we'll get a little bit more back to that. But first I would like to ask you a little bit about your background and how you found your interest about like plants and ethnobotany.
I always loved plants, and I had a grandfather who loved plants, and he wanted to be a gardener, and he was an orphan, and he was poor, and he couldn't afford studying, so he went for 3 months to the gardening school, and then he stopped. He learned grafting and basic gardening tools, and he got retired when I was little. So when I was little, he would go around with me into the woods. He would show me how to graft plants, how to cut hedges, how to plant beans. I was just following him like a dog everywhere. He taught me everything. And also, in our house, there lived an aunt, a widow, who would, 2 aunts actually, and they would collect nettles and make nettle soup. And they were saying that the old times people used to eat it. So I had these memories. Yeah, that's how it started.
So would you say that mainly it is the food aspect of the plants that you that was drawn to?
It's changing because when I was younger, I was just interested in recognizing plants, in plant taxonomy, in garden design. I thought that my father built a house and he was always busy. He never had time to make a proper garden. So when I was a teenager, I started organizing my parents' garden just to make it better. So that was another playground, yeah.
Like my experience now from being in Poland in a couple of days is that you have very strong traditional grounds on this both gardening and related to culture.
You mean me or you mean Polish people?
I mean, like in general in Poland, it's my experience, especially in the countryside, of course. But also in food culture, traditional food, I can see this a little bit more. You have more knowledge about conservation food and how to pick plants and keep them over winter.
I mean, in Poland, we have this recent history of food shortages in the 1980s. There was an economic crisis, people were making a lot of preserves. So now Poland is getting richer and people are losing this connection. They go to work for 8 hours, even in the countryside. They commute to work in factories, in companies. But they have recent memory of having farms, and a lot of people still have like a semi-farm. They would have chickens, and they would have old parents who have, a big garden with potatoes, with vegetables. So it's very easy to find people with experience of working in the land and knowledge like this. And we are losing it, but it's still like the first generation which is losing it. So although there are very much fewer farms, there are a lot of people for whom farming was normal 20 years ago. And also we have a large history of foraging for mushrooms. People still do it, and I would say it's not decreasing.
And also, like, if I compare to the Nordic countries, like, I would say that this knowledge is even more lost in where I come from.
Yeah.
Especially like preserving food like this over winter. And you would believe that the Nordic countries would be very, very interested in having food in over winter time, because it's a hard, long winter.
Yeah, I mean, it's normal for ethnobotany that you do studies with different ethnic groups. You get surprised. Sometimes, neighboring countries would have very different traditions. I remember I was doing research in a mountain range in Romania with Ukrainians living there. And in one part of the mountains, they had much larger knowledge of mushrooms than in the other. And I cannot explain why. That in one part, they only mainly collected chanterelles and porcini, and in the other, they knew much more.
Yes. Maybe passed on between generations.
Yeah,
I don't know. But like in one time in your life, your focus went from Poland, but then other countries, more international. Was this during your time of study that you are?
Later, because I bought land here after graduating my PhD, but I really wanted to be, self-sufficient, and also I had small children, and was just trying to, build a house and organize my life here. And it was so exciting and so absorbing that I didn't travel much. And then at some point I started reading, I decided to write a book about edible plants. And then I started buying books on internet bookshops. That started all this craze with, possibility of buying books on internet. And then I realized there's a lot of literature about Native Americans, and started reading about their ways of life and what they used and how they used it. And I incorporated it in my first book. But this started to make me think that maybe I should travel and document things. So when my second daughter turned 5, I just went on like traveling all the time and went to China. And then I did research in Croatia, and it was much easier then. And also Poland got a bit richer, so I had more money actually. And then I got the job at the university, and so the university started paying me money to go somewhere. So
what a great job!
Yeah, and I was thinking out these projects and doing them. Like one day I thought, why I would like to be on holiday all the time, so I'll do some research in Croatia. I discovered Croatia is not explored. I will document Croatia. So I got a grant, and for like 6 years I was all the time on holiday by the sea in Croatia, documenting the islands. I mean, working very hard, interviewing people, but all the time in the sunshine, sea, talking to old ladies and old fishermen. It was great.
Great combination.
Yeah.
And also so interested probably for you who has this strong interest of documenting other cultures' use of edible plants.
I will also add that it was an episode, this Croatia, because I also did fieldwork in the mountains, because that's usually where you find the knowledge. It survives more like in isolated, impoverished, high mountain areas. So I went to China, I went to the Tibetan plateau, to Laos, to Caucuses, to the inner Balkans, in some other places in the Balkans, to actually access these last holders of knowledge,
I think that it's so great, and it's also how I found you and I got to know your work is from this book you have written, Edible Ferns of the World, where you have traveled around and you write about different ferns that we, in Norway at least, don't have any culture to use in the kitchen. But then it caught my interest that you don't only you do the botany, yes, but you also are very interested in making food and how to make it edible, or techniques, traditional techniques.
I love food, and I think one of the differences between me and most foragers now is I'm interested in the difficult plants. it stems from the fact that I started as a person interested in survival, in self-sufficiency, in camping, and I didn't want to use any other ingredients. So I wanted to be completely pure. So I did a lot of experiments like that, just like eating only the pure food, the wild food, which brings you to plants which are, rarer, which were used by various tribes to get calories. The problem is that very often it means collecting protected plants, destroying populations of rare plants. So I don't practice it really in areas I cannot practice it. Like, for example, lily bulbs are really delicious, but they are rare here. I dug out like a few to try, but I would never go around and destroying the populations, But this gave me this knowledge which is deeper, And also I'm very interested in history, in archaeobotany and food history and archives. So every time I read about a plant, I try to find out everything about it. Was it eaten in the Neolithic? Are there any archaeological remains? Did people eat it in the medieval times,
Yes, I find that very interesting. And I have been wondering a little bit about what kind of food culture that you have been find the most inspiration from?
I think I got inspired most by 3 countries. One is China, and the love of ingredients in China. People use so many ingredients, and the same in Laos. But Laos is a tropical country, so it was inspiring more about using insects, because we still get a lot of the same insect families. So I could it was easier to transfer the knowledge about insects than about plants. And recently we published a paper about the history of spices in Poland. I introduced a term called ingredientization. It's a new term for culinary history. It means that for some reason, sometimes, some cultures get really interested in having a lot of ingredients. And it's usually to show off. So sometimes it's a sign of richness, and you become posh, and sometimes poverty. So in some cultures, when people are very poor, they will look for various ingredients, like in Laos. But sometimes they do it to show off and to dominate like other people culturally. So you are like kind of hipster, and you try these new foods, and you say these weird names that no one knows. You never tried chipotle, And then you say you get points every time you say, "Have you tried this?" And they say, "No, I never heard of it." Point,
yes.
Point, So I wrote about it in my recent paper. Yeah, because as I said, I try to go across, along, up and down, different countries, different epochs, to get the perspective, because the food culture changes. So even, this foraging movement, if you talk to foragers from England or Poland or different countries, they would use different things because they are strongly influenced by their own culinary culture. It always comes through. If I go to Britain to foraging events, they often make this dish, like a kind of casserole with red wine. They would get some pheasant, some meat, put some leaves, nettles and things, and then put red wine and cook it. So it's a very French, English thing.
Yeah.
In Poland, foragers often make soups, because this vegetable soup with like cream or milk, and because in many countries people make soups by blending things. No, it's not blended, it's just chopped. So like minestrone, like chopped bits of vegetables and boiled in a pot. This is very Slavic. So they often just restrict themselves to this, or to something making like flatbreads. So the Slavic culture basically is, making some gruel with grain or vegetables and making bread. So you have to introduce, ideas from other countries. So in the workshop, I made these pchali balls from Georgia, which are made with walnuts. So it brings me to Georgia. That's another amazing country. Georgia and Armenia, the Caucuses, also the smaller nations of the Caucasus. They preserve very ancient knowledge about plants which we get in Europe, because they have a similar climate. In the higher parts of Caucasus, you have spruce forests, you have beech forests, you have the same ferns, you have the same ground flora, the same species even, or very similar species. And then you realize they eat things that no one else in the whole of Europe eats.
No.
Also, the Georgian language is very unique, is very separate. So I think Georgians are the holders of the most ancient, archaic culture in Europe.
That's a good travel tip for people that wants to explore more wild food and different kind of food culture.
If they ever want to see the old pre-Indo-European culture, they should go to Georgia.
Yeah. I will definitely go to Georgia, but I have been in Armenia and I was also very pleased about their food culture.
Yeah.
If we can go back a little bit to the North Europe plants, I was wondering, maybe also just in Poland, like if you have any plants that you are especially bound to, like if you have a favorite plants for eating the root or the stem or the flower or the seed.
My favorite plants.
Yes.
Difficult to say because I enjoy the diversity, so I get bored with one plant. I enjoy actually changing plants, But definitely nettle, I really like. I like wild garlic, But I like linden buds, leaves, I really appreciate, lindens and oaks and acorns, something very sacred to me.
So you have interest of not only the herbs but also the trees, and you have also planted a lot of trees in your own property from different countries.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the modern idea of nature conservation maybe is not that good, because I should maybe care about native plants, and I do care about communities. The land I bought was abandoned, were fields, cultivated fields which were overgrown by trees. So I diversified the vegetation. I let some trees grow and become forests, and some places I turned into meadows. Yeah. You saw today, I said there was a potato field I turned into a forest in 27 years with lots of forest species. But I do plant trees which are interesting, mainly which are edible, but not only, because I think having a little bit of genetic diversity in the times when there are plant diseases and like tree diseases going around. So sometimes maybe having this extra diversity in hand, in case, is better. For example, recently there was this this spread of this ash dieback, The fungus is killing ash trees in Europe, and the Pennsylvanian ash from America is resistant. And I have a few Pennsylvanian ashes, and my European ashes died. Yeah. So at least I can show to people this is a Pennsylvanian ash.
You have a good backup.
But I think this is the biggest challenge for garden design: to what extent you are allowed and you should introduce foreign plants. Because you really have to answer yourself the balance, because some people are very conservative. They say, no, you don't introduce any foreign plants. You have to be aware of all the invasive plants, which are, difficult.
Yeah. But also my experience in your place was that you also have a lot of native species that you also have put there, like building, can I call it a food forest?
Yeah, I mean, I was aware when I was starting my forest in 1997, I was aware of the concept of permaculture, and I was consciously calling it permaculture garden. So from what I checked, this is the oldest permaculture garden in the whole of Poland, when most people never heard of this term, So yes, like for example, around the house, I would plant a lot of rosaceae plants like rowan, hawthorns, different species with large fruits, with different kinds of nuts, which is not easy in temperate climate. There's not so many species, so I just have a few species of walnuts, and like hickory, which is not fruiting yet, and related caria species from the same genus, or hazelnuts. There's not much more, But they do introduce things like, for example, water caltrop, which is here a native nut growing in the water, an annual nut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very impressive to see what kind of diversity that you have managed to get into your own land. And also, we speak a lot about endangered species, like the wild garlic that we saw, Allium ursinum. in your place today. And it made a great impact on me how you have took this into your own land, and now it is a rich meadow of wild garlic as far as your eye can see. I would say that was a great way of preserving an endangered species, like it is in Norway at least. The wild garlic is on the red list as an endangered species. So I say that if you want to preserve, maybe you can take and adopt a plant and take care of it, and then
and
maybe
also,
end up with that result.
When you plant plants and you see how they grow quickly or slowly, you have more respect for them. So when I saw how it is difficult for the lilies to thrive, I don't touch them in the wild because I know that I might destroy the work of many, many years. Or like the Solomon seal, which is here is common, but I also not overuse it because I showed you this bit like this is 12 years growth, But some plants grow very fast, so I know that I can use them. Wild garlic is quite slow, but not that slow, and it's here. We have abundant populations here, but it was still taken under partial protection after I made that plantation. I made my plantation over 20 years ago, and I was planting one bulb every 1 meter. So I had a meter long spade, and I would just go and one distance of one bulb. So I planted loads in different places, and I could see how in different places they behave differently. They grow, don't grow, they spread, they set seed, not set seed. So it's really fun to look at.
Yes, I do agree so much with that. Both that you learn so much by observing and testing and trying to cultivate, but also I agree with that it grows. Your own love for plants will grow during doing this work with plants, hands-on work.
So I often plant 100 plants of a species, or 12. These are my favorite numbers, 12 and 100. If it's a rare species, I buy 12 plants. If it's a common, I plant 100. And after a few years, I count. And you see, it's like with profits, like if you invest this something, does it bring profit or not? So I like the plants which bring a little bit of profit. For example, you plant 100 plants, and after a few years, you have 400, 500. Because they are spreading, but they are not bullish. They are not like invasive. The problem is you plant one and you get thousands. Yeah. Then, and some of them are native. There is a plant here, which is, I'll get it from here. It's Stellaria holostea. Yeah. So this is a native plant from local forest here, but I didn't have it in the forest. And I was planting just a few of them, and they just grew like crazy. I never knew that they can be so invasive. Local plants, but they became such a problem, just overgrowing everything. So you never know. And some plants, I plant 100, and after 3 years there are 70 or 7. So then I don't invest in them anymore, because I plant 100 plants in different habitats and see that they don't like my place. So why would I waste my time and energy and resources to do it? Because people say, why? What is it that in your garden these plants are so abundant? They are so lush and they are so happy. I said, because the unhappy ones died. And I never plant them again. Why would I plant them? So the ones which are relatively happy, even like narcissa, like daffodils, they are not native, they are not invasive. They don't spread very much. You plant 100, after 3 years you have 100. Yes. Some died, some succeed. They are ideal because you have control over them. Yes. And I don't really have workers. I only employ one guy to cut my meadows 1 day a year. He goes around and cuts a few meadows with a tractor, and maybe I would employ someone for 5-6 days a year to do some cutting for me when I'm busy. Yeah. And that's all. All the planting I do myself, all the harvesting, which gives me a sense of pleasure and independence. And I never let myself the feeling that, my garden is overgrowing, I should do this and that. My garden is to give me pleasure. I mean, when I'm old and weak, it will become forest, Yeah. And now I don't really try to change too much. I do change, and also you can do a lot of change just by planting a few plants a day.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For example, I would wake up in the morning and have a cup of coffee, and I bought 3 plants in the garden center, or I replant some plants, take a spade, move them, take a bucket, move it 300 meters, stop there, finish my coffee, go back home. This day is full. I'm free. 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't have to have it, but every day I want to do something useful like this. And
I
it
also
grows.
want to do something useful
And it grows,
like this.
you know. And I don't have to work hard all day. Hunter-gatherers work 3-4 hours a day. I work 3-4 hours a day all my life, you know.
Yeah, it's great.
But with sense. I mean, and also sometimes you do contradictory things. So if you have some vision, you know, some line, it's easier.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very amazed about your place today, but I'm also very amazed about your knowledge about different food culture and especially maybe preservation or food cooking techniques that are lost in many places of the world. And I've read a little bit about, like, for example, the ferns, how you make it edible. And I was wondering, like, in your travels in all these different countries, in all these different cultures, if you found some technique or some way that amazed you or fascinated you especially.
What amazed me is that in the Mediterranean countries like Greece, Croatia, Georgia, Turkey, people would often collect a lot of species of relatively toxic plants, even like buttercups, and they would boil them together and take the water out. This is something we overlook. We think in terms of, do you cook it for 5 minutes or 30 minutes? But actually, a very important step for many plants is to boil them for some time and take the water out, because this takes out a lot of toxins.
Yeah.
As I said, if you can eat nearly every plant in your flora, nearly every, apart from aconitum and a few other toxic species. If you boil it for half an hour, take the water out. You're quite safe.
Yes.
Your survival chances grow by, 999.
Because it's also my experience that we don't have too much knowledge about the biochemical properties in plants, and a lot of like glucosides, it goes away if you cook it or if you dry it.
Also, drying makes things more palatable. Like the Chinese would tell me, if you collect butternut, Staphylea, dry it. Yeah. It's healthier. If you collect Jiucai, which is bracken, it has, dry it. Yeah, and it breaks down toxins. Yeah. In Tibetan plateau, the Tibetans even collect marsh marigolds, Calta palustris, as a vegetable, but they dry it. Once in the process of drying, the bitterness goes.
I think like you should continue writing books about this topic, because this might be very valuable to a lot of people that have forgotten this knowledge. Yeah. For sure. I would like to know a little bit more about if you have any workshops like this planned ahead now for either plants or mushrooms, because in the association everybody is interested in both. Yeah. Here in Poland, and also if you can say your web page where people can find you and learn more about your work.
You can maybe put a subtitle with the address, but I have an English website called thewildfood.org, and I do workshops usually for 2 days, because people like coming for a weekend and relaxing and learning a lot, or walks. Sometimes I go to cities and especially to Warsaw, and I usually advertise it in the short term, like 7-10 days before. Oh, I'm coming to Warsaw. Hey, let's do a walk, and I get a lot of people like that as well.
Do you have like a newsletter?
Yeah, on the Polish website, and also on the English one. But I don't get many people from abroad because it's far. It's in the middle of nowhere, but it's close to airport actually.
Yes.
So I got people from a few countries, and you came from Norway, and there are some guys from Austria thinking of coming, and I'm open to translating during the workshop, and I know all the plants in English, so
I will put all these links in the video and the text under, so people can learn more about your work and what they can learn here. And it always was only 2 hours for us from the airport. And I would say I have got a lot of value for my money for staying here. And I've learned a lot of new species.
And I think the flights from Oslo are from every day even. And London is a few times a day. London is like an hour drive from here. It's an airport that flies to London every day. and to different, from Krakow you get to nearly any capital of Europe, so you hire a car and you come for a longer workshop, and the vegetation here is deciduous forest. In Central Europe is actually quite high rainfall, so it's very lush, and you get a lot of the same species as you get in Austria and Switzerland, in border of France and Germany, or Bavaria, or this kind of area. Czech Republic, it's the same vegetation, beeches and oaks and lime trees and hornbeam and the same flora.
Also, for us Scandinavian people, it's very relevant with the species that are here native. And also, I would like to just lift up the food aspect. How many great dishes and different plants that you have presented to us in these 2 days for inspiration. Absolutely worth every second. So thank you so much for both having this interview with me and for this wonderful weekend.
I hope there'll be more people from Scandinavia coming.
Yeah.
I have very good cooperation with Uppsala. I publish the books in Uppsala by Uppsala University, which is available online, free PDF. It's called The Pioneers in European Ethnobiology. The first co-author was Ingvar Svanberg from Uppsala. Amazing guy studying the history of use of plants in Scandinavia.
Wow, I will definitely look into that also. Okay, great.